guys rolling?
Yep, we're good.
Cool. What fish do you like? Welcome to part one of the Fishbowl with Michael Rubin. Thanks for tuning in.
I don't want to you to tell me I had to eat them.
No, you don't have to eat them. Nobody's
You
eating
remember,
them
I'm
yet.
Jewish. Jewish people don't fish.
They don't fish?
No.
Mike is a CEO of Fanatics. He is a part owner of the 76ers. He's a billionaire. He's an entrepreneur. He's interested in criminal justice reform. Most importantly to me, somehow he seems like a normal guy. So check this out. Really good interview. You know, a lot of people talk about people that have a lot of money. Like, that doesn't define you. You're a down-to-earth dude. You're somebody with ingenuity. You're somebody with an interesting story. Somebody who has a lot of money, usually I associate with maybe their story wasn't that interesting, especially in the business world. You've been hustling since you were 12. And some people have heard the story, but you sold baseball cards at a camp to camp parents. I mean, usually it's one echelon of hustling when you sell to other kids, but when you're selling to the parents,
Had to go where the money was.
That's pretty impressive. You know, at 12, you got your ski shop started. Most kids aren't thinking that way. Do you see when you deal with your ownership friends or people who've been successful in business that they had those roots where they knew they had a plan early on? Or is it kind of depend on each personality?
Yeah, well, let me tell you, for me, actually, money doesn't drive me at all.
Yeah.
And it never has. Like, I think money is a report card of how you're doing, how are your results, because generally, if your results are good, I think the money follows. For me, like, I love to win, and I've always been driven to win, and I think just good things follow from winning. So I think it's pretty widely known. You know, you grew up, you were an incredible athlete.
Yeah.
I was, one of God's worst athletes ever.
Right.
I was also a terrible student.
One of the worst ever.
Yeah, definitely one of the worst athletes ever.
Okay.
I was a terrible student as well. The only thing I was good at as a kid was I loved to work. It's like, it's what I excelled at. So, I think when generally kids figure out how to, go after what they're good at. So if you're not a good student and you're not a good athlete, then you go after what you are good at. And for me, it was always work and business. And I loved it ever since I was a kid. I had that entrepreneurial gene where I loved to work. I loved to build things. I love to grow things. And that's just the way I was born.
Having a Porsche at 15 doesn't hurt with the money that you earned.
Yeah. Oh, I'll tell you what. I've in my life, I've had a lot of wins. I've also had a lot of epic failures. I did have a Porsche at 15, and 16 I
What
was
color?
went bankrupt.
What
It was
color?
red.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's part of a failure, but that's the thing is like, where do you draw the line? Like if you've got kids and my son Waylon, who's 3 now, grew up to be you, I'd be like, fuck yeah, this dude's awesome. But like at 12, you wouldn't be able to tell. How do your parents like tell through these successes and failures, and how do we reinforce to our kids that like, listen, you can dream and success is not a linear path. We so often get caught up in like, there's only one way to succeed.
Yeah.
Go to college, get a job when you get out, etc. You did it differently.
Yeah, so first, I really believe that failing is great. Just fail fast.
Yeah.
Like, go out and go after whatever you want to do. You believe in it, you think it's a good idea, go try it. If it doesn't work, then learn from that failure and move on. And so, if you go through my entire business career, I've had so many failures, and generally after each big failure has been an even bigger success. Because I've generally learned from that and moved on. So, look, as a parent, it's funny. My daughter's now 13 and a half, and you could see her little business brain working, but I imagine, at that time I was already running a ski shop doing $25,000 in business, and then 2 years later I was nearly bankrupt. And so I think, you generally want to encourage your kids, and look, I can get a lot of parental advice from others that would be good for me to get, but I think you generally want to encourage your kids to do what they believe in and just support them, unless you think they're really going off, off the rails.
There's some things that we're like, yeah, this is fucked. But
yeah, that's right. And my daughter, it's funny. I've got a rule with her. Like, unless I think she's doing something really bad, I don't give a shit.
Right.
So I don't pick at her on the little things. I only focus on the big things that matter. I'm worried about like.
If you pick on the little things,
life's too short.
They tune you out.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, she already went from thinking I was cool to thinking I'm not cool now that she's 13 and a half and that she knows everything. So the last thing I want to do is focus on anything other than the big things that matter.
Well, I mean, like you talk about failure and success, they kind of go hand in hand when you're going through a process like that and you're learning on the fly. I mean, like you had to take a loan from your dad when you went bankrupt at 16, but one of the interesting things about that was like you can't be bankrupt when you're 16, like by law?
Yeah, well, I didn't know that. It was actually a fascinating story because I started my first ski shop when I was about 12 years old in my parents' basement. And I did the second year, I was 13, I did about $25,000 in business.
Yeah.
Made about $15,000 profit because I had no employees, I had no overhead, and I was borrowing all the merchandise on consignment and paying for it as I would sell it. So I decided to open the ski shop the next year. Now I'm a 14-year-old, and if a 14-year-old owns a ski shop 32 years ago, that's like a very big story because it was pre the internet and pre all these technology kids. It was truly a different world. And, you know, I thought I was king. And here I am running the ski shop. I'm doing $100,000 the first year and then $500,000 the second year. And then basically the following year, we had a small problem. And if you're in the ski business, you kind of need snow. And it didn't snow that year. So I got left with $200,000 of bills and about $80,000 of inventory. And it was so bad, and people don't believe the story, it was so bad that in the spring of that year, after, you know, it didn't snow, the sheriff showed up at my house every day. I got sued probably 100 times. She would show up at my door, she'd knock, and it was before I go to school, I'd give her a hug, and she'd give me the lawsuits.
You get your
every day.
backpack and like an apple and like, you know, like all the kids
Yeah,
things,
I'm
but you
taking
got
the blue lawsuits.
$500,000.
And here are the lawsuits.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I was done. It was over. It was like, you know, I was a failure. I was giving up on business, and I hired a bankruptcy lawyer. And we were going through the whole process, and he said to me, like, kind of after a couple meetings, "How old are you?" I said, "I'm 16. He said, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm 16. He's like, "Well, I've got good news for you. You have to be 18 to legally incur debt." I'm like, "Well, so what's that mean?" He's like, "Well, I think we're gonna have a much easier time dealing with the situation." He got all the vendors together, and they had like a meeting of the vendors, and people were like growling at me, and they were really rightfully so mad. And he said, "You know, Mr. Rubin owes you $200,000, and you know he'd like to offer settlement." They said, "We won't settle." They said, "Well, Mr. Rubin's 16," and everyone's face color changed. And about 10 minutes later,
I'm like mad and impressed.
no, more shocked.
Shocked.
More shocked. And so I settled my debts for $38,000. The problem was I didn't have the money.
Right.
So it was the first time I ever went to my dad to borrow money. And I grew up in a very middle-class family. Like $38,000 was a lot of money. The house that we grew up in, that I lived my entire life as a kid, you know, until I moved out on my own, was I think my parents bought the house for $42,000.
Fuck, how'd your dad's color change on his face when you told him you needed a loan for 30?
I think I had created a lot of drama for the previous years with my parents, so nothing had shocked them at this point. So I went to my dad, I said, "Hey, can I borrow this $38,000? He said, "Look, if you agree to go to college, I'll lend you the $38,000. So I agreed, we paid off the debt. And then a small thing happened a few weeks later. We found another ski shop that went bankrupt. They had $200,000 of inventory. And it got sold for, I think it was either $11,000 or $13,000. And I bought it. So I went back to my dad and said, "Dad, great news. I'm going to be able to pay you back the money sooner than I thought. I just need to borrow $13,000 more. My dad's like, "Are you out of your fucking mind? Like, you want to borrow another $13,000? Hell no, that is not happening."
He's like, "I'm drawing the line somewhere. I don't know where it is, but
you got your one-time $38,000, you're done."
Yeah.
So I started going door to door, and I went to neighbors and said, "Who wants to lend me $13,000?" And someone said, "Hey, I'll lend you the money, but it's a great deal for you. So can you pay me $1,000 a week interest?" So I borrowed the $13,000 for $1,000 a week interest. He lent me the money, and I got the yellow pages out and just started looking for ski shops and saying, "Hey, you know, this is Michael Rubin. I've got some excess skis. Would you like to buy them? I can give you like 50% off." And within 3 weeks, I sold like 10% of the inventory and paid back the $16,000, the $13,000 plus the interest. Now I had all of the ski inventory left. Okay, I had like 80, 90% of the inventory left. And that actually taught me about how I got in the closeout business. 5 years later, I was doing $100 million buying and selling excess skis and excess footwear. And that was all from almost going bankrupt, buying this other ski merchandise from a bankruptcy sale, and then saying, "Wow, this is pretty cool. I made this money quickly. Why don't I start doing this on a bigger scale?"
Yeah.
I was literally the largest buyer and seller of athletic footwear and ski equipment in my early 20s. So to me, that goes back to most failures learn to, kind of go to your next success.
What's the number one thing you look for when you're hiring somebody or you're trying to amass talent around you in an interview process, whatever that is?
Yeah.
Like, what's a skill that somebody who's young in the world going into business right now needs to have?
I'll tell you, my answer will actually be different than a lot of other people's answer. What I generally look for is a couple things. One, expertise in the area that we're hiring somebody for. Two is really good common sense. I think there's a lot of people that are super educated, super smart, but they lack common sense. So I'm looking for like street smarts.
For sure.
And the third thing I'm looking for is someone who works great as a team member.
Yeah.
Because I think you take so many people that are great athletes,
Yeah.
but they're not great part of a team. And to me, like for us to win in any of our businesses, we need to build a great team. And so I'm always focused on how do I put a great team? How do you field? How do you put together a great team in business that can work together? And so to me, if you get street smarts, domain expertise, and somebody's a real good team member, I think you're going to get great results.
Oh, man, I'm looking for a job, bro.
Let's
Come on,
go.
like, what do you need? Thanks for watching part 1 of the Michael Rubin installment of the Fishbowl. Part 2 is all about being a part owner in the NBA.